Read the Bible every day so you'll be full of faith. Welcome you to join Bible Race to read the entire Bible in 2 years. I believe God will bless you, He will lift you up, and your life will never be the same.
Genesis chapter 22. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. The 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. And Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took his hand, the fire and the knife, so they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father. He said, Here I am, my son. He said, Behold, the fire and the wood. But where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, The Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this, and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham lived at Beersheba. Now after these things it was told to Abraham, Behold, Milcah also was born children to your brother Nahor, Uz his firstborn, Uz his brother, Kemuel the father of Aram, Chizd, Hazel, Pildash, Jilapha, Bethul father Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Noah, Abraham's brother. Moreover, his concubine, whose name was Rumah, bore Teba, Geha, Tahash, and Makkah.
The book of Genesis, chapter 23. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, that is, Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham rose up from before the dead and said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The Hittites answered Abraham, Hear us, my lord. You are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land, and he said to them, If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat from me Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burying place. Now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, of all who went in at the gate of his city. No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the sight of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed down before the people of the land. And he said to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, But if you will, hear me. I give the price of the field. Accept it from me that I may bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, My lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave that was in it, and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area, was made over to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the Hittites, before all who went in at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave that is in it were made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites.
So now let's read how in chapter 22 how God teach us how to live in grace. So in verse 1, after these things God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. So the first prayer that we have to do is that God, may you open up my ears so that I can always listen even when I live in your grace. So remember, many people, when they are living in grace, in abundance, maybe they have a good housing, good job, good sons and daughters, very healthy, and they're rejoicing, then they become deafened to God's calling. So may God help us that every morning we can hear his calling on us. So next in verse 2, he said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering, on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So in verse 2, in the Chinese Union Version, there's one word missing in the translation. In original text, it should be, Please take your son. So there is actually a please there. And this is how God speaks to Abraham, that it says please. So remember, as long as in the Bible you see this word please, either it's in Genesis, Exodus, or book of Isaiah, as long as God says please, that means God knows that this is a great challenge to men. So have you ever heard God speaks please to you? He asks you please to do something. Whenever we hear these words, we know that God is not just calling or asking us, but we will know that when God asks us to do something that he says please to us, he is actually wanting us to know his will deeper. It's actually a critical timing that we can know his love in a deeper level, because through offering up Isaac, God wants Abraham to know God's heart. And actually, the location where Abraham sacrificed Isaac is exactly the place where God sacrificed his own son, which is the place where Jesus Christ died for us on the cross. So whenever God says, please, we have to know that this is deeply connected to God's will. It's related to the fact that God wants to elevate, upgrade our understanding to his will. Here we can pray, God, may you help me to be able to hear your gracious will when you ask me to do something with please, and help me to have enough faith so that I can respond to you correctly. Whenever you say please to me, I will have this courage and strength that I can make the right decision out of wisdom. So here, God's testing is to remove your beloved Isaac. So what is your favorite one? So if today God's remove it or take it away, what would be your response? Are you able to respond like Abraham? So here in verse 3, you can see again that Abraham rose up early in the morning. So as long as you see Abraham rose up early in the morning, that indicates that he has no hesitation in responding to God's command and his words. So he woke up in the morning before the dawn. The first thing he did is to respond to God's words. So he cut the wood for the burnt offering and rose arose and went to the place of which God has told him. So it takes 3 days to arrive at the place where God told him, and it's roughly 140 kilometers away. So in those 3 days, he doesn't care if there will be firewood in this mountain, so he has prepared the firewood beforehand. And while they're traveling, he asked his servants to stay in one place. And the reason he did all these things is to remove anything that could make him feel pain or make him regret or anything that would hinder him responding to God's command, God's request. He will remove all these hindrances so that, and this is the true meaning of what does it mean to put ourself to death, put our old self to death. So today, do you know that God has promise on you? Do you know that today we have our flesh and our old self will constantly hindering us from stepping into God's calling and respond to God's command? So today, is it possible for us to try to remove every single hindrance that would prevent us from stepping into the calling or blessings? Or even it could be something that seems good, something that you want to just grab hold of it, that you feel that it's enough and you are not asking for more from God. Oh Lord, maybe I have this. This is enough. I just want this. I don't need anything else. Is it possible that in huge grace you will have this kind of thoughts? If you have, today may we ask God to have mercy on us, because nowadays God is also dealing with our favorite Isaac in each one of our heart. And when he's dealing with it, he's actually helping us to know his will deeper, and he wants to elevate us to stepping into the calling he has for us. So Abraham, he took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And at that moment, Isaac is likely not a child anymore. He was probably between 20 to 25, so he was actually quite strong. And on the contrary, Abraham was roughly 125 years old. And he took in his hands the fire and the knife. And next in verse 7, and Isaac said to his father Abraham, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." So here, these are actually some very intimate way to call each other, my father, my son. And then Isaac then asked, "Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" So their families, here you can see that Isaac doesn't know what's going to happen, but Abraham knows what's going to happen. So is there any offering that in your life that if you offer it up, it will actually make you feel painful? If every single offering that we did, that we never experienced this same kind of pain, heartache, this sharping pain, then that means we don't truly know what's the true meaning of offering or sacrifice. That means we don't really know what's the true sacrifice in love. So as a father, he has to know, he has to learn how to offer up the most beloved son, Isaac, and offering him to God. This is definitely very difficult for anyone who is a parent. But today we also need to believe that when we offer up Isaac, then we not just we can step into our calling, but our children can also step into their calling. And actually, sometimes it is exactly our fleshly love that is hindering me and my descendants, my next generation, to step into God's blessing and promises. So today we can ask God to bless us, to help us to really see behind every single request, every single pleas that God has for us. He wants to help us to understand Him and know Him deeper. And all His intention is to fulfill us, is to bless us, is to have favor on us, and to elevate us. So next, Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So remember this word, quote unquote, provide, because at that time it says, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." And this is the meaning of Jehovah Jireh. So here it's not just God unidirectionally revealed this to Abraham that he's Jehovah Jireh, but instead, actually, it's Abraham. He first said that. He first declared that God will provide for us. He first declared God's character. So that's why God's character can be manifested to Abraham. So, their families, are you longing to know God's character? Are you longing to know that He's the one abundant in goodness, in greatness, in kindness, in power, favor, and almighty? Are you longing to experience that He's the one who turned all the bad thing to good thing, turned all the curses into blessing? He make something out of nothing. So in this case, all the key is that you have to proclaim it in every single action, in your response. You have to manifest, show that you actually want to know. So in that case, then his glorious characters will be able to reveal to us. So it's definitely not just you proclaim it, then God's character will pour out on you. But instead, it's that you can pray that, Lord, I believe and I will respond. I want this. I'm so longing to see it. Then in those cases, God's character will be able to fill inside us. So indeed, in verse 9, Abraham did the thing that God requests. Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. So here you can see that all God's trial, there's always going to be a boundary. All the trials that God is giving to us, it will never exceed the amount that we can bear. So please definitely not say that God has mistreated us or saying that, oh, why am I so unlucky? Don't say that, oh God, why do you treat me like this, treat me badly? But instead, we will be able to accept it and we will say, Lord, thank you for allowing me my faith to be elevated in every single trial. Thank you for through all these testing that me and my sons and my family, we will have a portion in your calling, in your promises and in your glory and in your presence, that I can know you even deeper. So I can give thanks to you. And this will become our response to God in every single trial. So indeed, later on, God says, for now I know that you fear God. So you can see every single quote unquote please, any request that seems to be so unreasonable, it seems like a pain that we cannot endure or a sudden storms in our life, all of these are actually testing whether or not our heart truly fears God. So today, if there are many troubles or many pains in your surroundings, in your circumstances, please don't lose your heart that fears the Lord. Then next, indeed, God will provide, the Lord provide, as he is Jehovah Jireh, he provide. And that he provide because Abraham, he has first declared it. So he says that God will provide. So God fulfill according to his faith. So today, as long as you proclaim according to your faith that God will heal, then God will be your Jehovah Rapha. If you proclaim that God will always be with me, then God becomes your Emmanuel. If you say that God, yes, I believe I can have victory through you, then God becomes your Jehovah Nisi. So the key is that how I will respond to God in my faith, then God's power, his character will be able to manifest on me. So next, God knows. Then in verse 17, 18, God releases his promises and blessing again. I will surely bless you and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sands that is on the seashore, and your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. So their families, all the trials are deeply connected to God's blessing. All the testing is connected to God's glory. Whenever it seems like God is taking back his grace, then we will know that this trial is actually connected to our fear of the Lord. And our fear of the Lord is always connected to God's promise on us. So after seeing all this, do you know how to respond to God? Do you know how to live in his grace? Do you know how to extend and continue walking on our destiny in grace? This is something that we have to learn. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So remember, in all these previous chapters, in Abraham, there are 7 lessons that he learned to listen to God's word. So lesson number 1, when he went to Egypt, he fell, he has his weaknesses, and God exposed those weaknesses. So he learned that he cannot rely on himself. He shall not just look at the circumstances, but instead he shall rely on God solely. And the second lesson is God, through some circumstances, separate Lot and Abraham, so that he has to give up on Lot, his kinsman, so that he will learn that God himself will be his inheritance, his abundance. And next, in the third lesson, God, through rising up, through the battle of the 4 kings against 5, Abraham learned that I have to rely on God, that he will not choose the pride and the seemingly blessing from the king of Sodom, but instead he will choose the blessing and peace from the king of Solomon. And he will learn that I will solely rely on God, and I will ascribe all the glory and blessing back to God again. And the fourth lesson is through the making the covenant with Abraham, and in this process of making the covenant, only God walked through the divided carcasses, and Abraham did not walk through it. And even though there will be birds of prey trying to intervene, there will be dreadful and great darkness falling upon, but he learned how to fight back. He learned how to declare warfare towards the power of the darkness so that God's promises, his covenant, can be fulfilled on us. So the point of warfare is not whether I win or lose, but instead, the point of warfare is to allow God to participate, to let his covenant be fulfilled on me. And the outcome of the warfare is actually in God's hand. And next, in the fifth lessons, in the process of waiting, we saw Abraham's weaknesses again. Even though Hagar gave birth to Ishmael, but God also led Abraham to learn to do circumcision. And through circumcision, he is now separated from the flesh, separate from his old style, and he will no longer try to use his own hands to speed up God's timing and his will. And he learned to live in God's schedule. And in the sixth lesson, Abraham made the same mistake again in Gerar. He lied again, saying that Sarah is his sister after 20 years. So this event is actually to remove his very, very deep shame. Whenever you fail, when you have weaknesses, maybe some weakness that you have mistakes 10 years, 20 years ago being exposed, you have to know that this is actually God's healing process. He's trying to heal our shame. He's trying to restore us back to an honorable prince. And lastly, the seventh lesson, God asked Abraham to send Ishmael away and also asked him to offer up Isaac. As if God is trying to make Abraham having nothing again, but it's actually God's intention is to let Abraham know that the Ishmael from him will also become a great nation, and the one from Sarah, Isaac, he will be the one who inherit the promises. But this entire process, it has to be fulfilled through sacrifice after sacrifice, separation and after separation. So eventually, all these promises can become one, can come true in Abraham. And actually, these promises will only be 100% fulfilled when Jesus Christ came back again. So these are the 7 lessons that Abraham learned in this process. So in the end of chapter 22, there is a recorded genealogy, and here it's talk about Nahor and Milcah, the brothers of Abraham. Oh, they have so many child. So actually, these recording of genealogy is a preparation for Isaac, because eventually Isaac will meet his wife Rebecca. So here, this recorded genealogy is not only recorded that God, he now fulfilled Abraham, then in the next step, God is going to establish Isaac. So their families, today we can ask God for more grace and also ask God to give us the wisdom to how to live in his grace, and also ask God to help us to learn how to keep stepping into our calling in grace. Amen. So today we are going to look at Genesis chapter 23 and 24. And actually these two chapters, we can look at it from 2 perspectives. So one perspective is to see the maturation of Abraham's life, that he knows that he has to prepare for the burying ground for himself and for Sarah. And on the other hand, he's also looking for a daughter-in-law for his son so that God's promise can be completely fulfilled, so that when he's still alive, he can see that step by step that he followed God's promises, that he refused to find the daughter-in-law for his son in the land of Canaan. But at the same time, we can also see that in our current life, we as a Christian, for the elder brother and sisters, how can we prepare the burying ground for ourselves in the future? Because this actually has very important spiritual meaning. And also because this is the way how we can pass on God's promises, how God's guidance in our life to our next generation. And also on the other hand, we can also teach our next generation how to prepare for marriage and tell them what are some keys when we are looking for our spouses, so that God's promise and his blessings will not just stop in this generation, but can be passed on into our next generation, that all of them can live in God's promise. So now let's first read Genesis chapter 23 verse 1. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So this is the only places where in the Bible it has recorded the years of a woman. It's only Sarah. So that means when Sarah, she has fulfilled all the destiny, all the calling that God has for her in her life. That means her life is completed. So here we can pray for our years on earth. Oh Lord, may you help me on this earth, no matter if I live till 60, 70, 80, or 90 years old. Oh God, I want that my life to be counted in your kingdom, to have, and I want my life at your church in your will is something that can last forever. So later on, so Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Then in verse 4, Abraham said, I am a sojourner and foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. So here Abraham is saying that I want to buy a land, but how did the Hittites answer him? He says, Hear us, my Lord, you are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. But Abraham did not agree with their proposal. Why? Because in verse 7, Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land, and he said to them, If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron, the son of Zohar. So actually, Abraham has searched the land already, and he knows where to buy. But why did Abraham choose to buy the lands when the Hittites are already offering the best lands to him? It's because the entire land of Canaan is actually God has given them to Abraham and his descendants. However, it's not the timing yet because it still take another 430 years before Abraham and his descendants can inherit this land. Only until in these 430 years after they're enslaved in Egypt and after the sin of the Canaanites come to completion, and that would only be the time when God give this lands to the Israelites, and when God will allow the Israelites to driven away all the Canaanites from this land. So at this moment, Abraham has to purchase this land. He cannot use this land for free because God hasn't give the land of Canaan to Abraham yet. So note that the first piece of land that Abraham bought in the land of Canaan is actually a burying ground. So he has to search it and he has to be willing to pay the price, just like he is giving a down payment so that he can know that, oh Lord, eventually this land will all become mine. But God, now I am willing to pay the price so that your promises can be fulfilled on me. So their families, and especially brothers and sisters who are older, we have to also see that how can we prepare for ourselves, our future burying ground? And we have to prepare for it. It's because we want to see the passing on of our faith. We have to see the passing on of God's promise and God's blessings so that we are willing to pay this down payment so that God's promise can be glorified through burial, through funeral, and his faith can also be passed on, and so that God's respectable status in our family will not be eroded, but instead it will be passed on through generations. So that's why he said, please give me the cave of Machpelah at the end of his field. However, here Ephron, he's actually very smart. He proposed that, oh, don't just buy the cave. Why don't you also buy the field? And in verse 15, it says, My Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Don't just buy the cave. So if you buy the field, then I can also give you the cave. But the problem here is that the price he asked for, 400 shekels, actually costs a lot. So Ephron is trying to take advantage of Abraham as the price he gave is far beyond the actual value of the field and the cave. But what Abraham sees is not about the value of this piece of land, but instead he sees the entire promised land of Canaan is related to God's promise. So for him to buy this piece of land is to continue God's promises, is to make sure that he can pass on God's promises in my offspring, because I want God's promises to keep passing on from generation to generation. So he did not try to bargain with Ephron. And then in verse 16, Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. So indeed, the field was sold to Abraham at this astronomical price, and the contract was signed in the hearing of everyone. So this is the first time that Abraham have a piece of land in the promised land of Canaan, and it's a piece of burying place. Then in verse 20, the field and the cave that is in it were made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites. Later on, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they all were buried here. Even Joseph, when he died in Egypt, he told his offspring that don't bury me in Egypt, even though it would have been a state funeral, but instead I want my body to be buried in the promised land to the cave of Machpelah. It's not that there's anything special in this cave, but instead it's because this land, it represents God's promise to Abraham, the promised land of Canaan, so that Abraham, through this land, can pass on this promise to his offspring. So their families, in terms of the funeral, even though we might not treat it as a taboo, but more than just that, we have to let our offspring know that through the funeral, the reason why we care so much about it is because we want our offspring to see God's promise, blessing, and calling can be passed on through generations through this. That we can pass on God's blessings, gifts, and God's remembrance of our serving, so that all our future descendants, they will also remember these things, and by that will also inherit the great blessings that God has for us.
Dear Bible Race viewers and families in Christ, thank you for watching our videos. We hope our sharing can enrich your life. If you find the content helpful, we hope you will support our ministry so we may continue to produce high-quality videos to serve the kingdom of God and hope to bless more people's lives. You can donate in the following ways: online giving by PayPal. If you are residing in Taiwan, you may also donate by bank transfer. Thanks again for your viewing and support. Every contribution is our greatest encouragement. We sincerely appreciate your support. May God bless you abundantly. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share.